First up, I'd like to ask Dr. Peter Highnam. He was the Director of Research of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He on assignment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for 2.5 years. Prior to that, he served 6 years at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency, IARPA. You know, that's DARPA, but we can't tell you what we're doing. And right now, he's the Deputy Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Just to give you a little background on DARPA, those are the guys that invented this little thing called the internet. And they helped with high-speed processors that created these little things called cell phones. And they also put the money into creating these things that are called flat panel televisions. So they invented a few cool things that we all take for granted nowadays. So first up, I'd like to ask Dr. Heine to join us. Second on the stage is going to be Dr. Steve Ohmic. He's the CEO of Riverside Research. He has over 28 years of research and executive leadership experience in the private sector and the defense and intelligence agencies. And prior to joining Riverside Research, he was president of Applied Communications Sciences. In other words, an underachiever. Third, I'd like to ask him to join us on stage. Third is Mr. Mark Westergren. He's a senior program director at Perspecta. He has over 34 years of executive experience leading large, complex defense, intelligence, and cyber organizations. He retired as a Major General in the United States Air Force. His military career spanned scientific intelligence and foreign area career fields and encompassed a wide variety of operational staff, command, and joint assignments in Asia, Europe, Middle East, and the United States. And just be glad I didn't read all of the bios of all of these folks, but we can certainly give them a little more experience. So if I could ask General Westergren to join us on stage. So we're going to start off. They have microphones up here, and I'm going to just turn it over to them to just give a few introductory remarks. So Dr. Heine, if you'd like to go first, I think we have to turn those on. So. Oh, it's on.
Well, thanks very much for coming. For those who've never heard me before, you have to calibrate for the deep Texas accent. Okay, it takes a little while, but you'll get there. So this is a very interesting session for me. This week, I was briefing on the Hill. I did a fireside chat in town on AI, the topic of the moment. And it makes you think occasionally all the way back to what made the decisions, how did I make decisions that took me on a rather circuitous path to get to this point, working for what I think is the best agency in the government for R&D. And I'm hoping that in the Q&A sessions we can get into some of that, because when you start out in STEM, at the beginning it's hard. You will fail. There will be some very hard days, especially if you don't have people at home who can help you or people at school who can help you. You have to power through it. And then once you have STEM, especially as a closet mathematician and computer scientist, if you have those things under control, everything else just seems to happen. Okay.
Thank you. Next, Steve.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everybody. We really appreciate all of you being here. By way of background, I got into STEM as a career kind of through the back door. I was more interested in how things worked. One of the themes of this STEM symposium is curiosity, and I always had a lot of curiosity about how things worked, and that was the driving force for me. I wasn't particularly gifted in mathematics. I'm not a closet mathematician, but that's the technical aspects of how things worked, to Peter's point, meant that you take on a educational path that's not always easy, it's not always straightforward. There are parts of it that you may not like, and other parts that you may love, but like anything, it's just a set of building blocks that you're trying to put together that establish a framework that you can better understand science and technology. And so for me, the importance was people along the way who had encouraging things to say along the line. My family was not one that had a lot of technical background educationally, but a family that understood the value of education. So I had to get that encouragement, I had to get that, understanding from external sources and teachers along the way who gave me, like I say, just a little bit of nudging, a little bit of encouragement that I needed at some key points. And maybe we'll talk about that a little later in the morning, but those were the things that mattered a lot to me. As I entered the workforce, you know, a lot of the things I did technically were within the defense and intelligence world. So I lived in a space where I couldn't talk to my family about what I did, but the technology that I worked on, the things that I did were nothing short of spectacular. And Peter's right. There are some of these agencies within the government. DARPA is certainly one of them. IARPA is also another one of them that offer the kind of technology exposure to people that you simply can't get anywhere else. And it's just phenomenal to be part of that community. I'm happy to be here today representing Riverside Research. We are a high-tech non-for-profit, which means that we have a lot of money that we can put back into technology development that we do internally. What we call that is the Open Innovation Center. Jeff Purcell, who runs that Open Innovation Center, is here with us today. He, along with Corinne Jorgensen, who is our head of marketing and communications, have put together a series of experiments and displays and interactive activities in the multipurpose room that I hope you'll all be able to go by and see. Again, it underscores the power of curiosity, which is something that we're all about. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you. I like to stand up just because it's hard for me to sit down there when you're tall. Keep like that. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I'm excited about being able to push the idea of STEM, because this is not just something that you want to say this is a job you need to have. This is going to be part and parcel of our future. It already is now. Every device you have, every computer that you know, all the things that run our systems, they're all based on STEM background to get to here. And in the future, it's going to be even more and even better. So how we integrate these things, how we think about these things, how we put them together is part of where we as a society, as well as where we as a world are going. So get on that trail and let's go with it, because it's going to be the future. The important thing about being here also is to sort of help your children, like Steve's curiosity, like myself. I grew up overseas, so my first view was, how did I get here? How do I get on planes? How does those things work? How do all these systems that work come together so I can do other things and be other places? That was where I started from, the curiosity angle. But it was beyond that. It was, hey, if I know how things work, how do I now be part of how to make things work? How do I get into that area where I can help to make those things that make things work? I want to apply the ability to do that. So the problem was, coming from the background that I did, my parents were missionaries. They had no technical background. They had no scientific understanding. They did push me, though, from a curiosity standpoint, go with what you want to do. But the question was, how do I get to school? How do I get through college? How do I pay for things like that? And it was a difficult struggle to trying to figure out how to get to that next level. And what I chose was to go through a scholarship through the ROTC program, the Reserve Officer Training Corps, and go into the military. The intent was to do what they say. Come in for 4 years, get a degree, show what you want to do in the country, and then go on and do with your life. Two things happened. One was I was able to get my degree and then go right into the labs. And right at the beginning, I was working in integrated circuitry, how to build integrated circuits, things that became the parts of computers and cell phones today. That was just exciting. From the very beginning, I went, wow, we're doing this as part of the government. There are plenty of those areas that are government related, but many of those skills and tools became part of the normal world. But then I started to like what I was doing in the military, because it's about driving missions, about outcomes, about taking different kinds of technologies, putting it together in an integrated way, and solving problems that we have, whether it be defense or intelligence-related problems. And Steve has, they worked in a lot of these intelligence-related things, and we worked together to put those things together. Those integrated solutions are how we can solve our issues today. Now I've transitioned from the military, and I'm working for Perspecta. Another I chose this company. You probably haven't heard of it. It was merged last year of 3 different companies, Vencor, DXC, and Keypoint, to come together to bring the different skills of all the variety of vast amount of STEM-related folks. engineering, data processors, analysts, IT professionals, cybersecurity folks, intelligence analysts, a whole slew of folks with excellent skills to come together as a company to help the clients move forward, transform the digital network, transform their ability to do things forward, and help them complement their future. So that's sort of how this company is and how we're trying to do that. And I'm able to bring in some of the perspectives from the military and the defense and the intelligence side to help them move forward. But it gets back to the beginning. Encouraging the children to go with what you want to do, helping to move that forward, recognizing that it's all about bringing things together. And the future, as Ed said, we don't know how it's going to be. We don't know where the puck is going. We do know that the technologies that are coming together now are going to be the baselines or the foundations for future technologies. We don't know how they're going to integrate. We don't know what those technologies will morph into and what kind of fields they'll be connected to. So many of the other fields that are going to be developing are going to be things that technology will be linking to. So everything's going to have a technology STEM component. So this is why this is so critical to the future. It's going to all be linked up and integrated in some fashion or form. So get on portions of those. Even if you're not right in the core of the STEM, you can be on part of understanding how it works, how things apply, and how you can bring that together for yourselves as well as for your community. So thanks, Ed.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I'm going to come out in the audience and let you guys ask some questions. First one, I was born 6 months before Sputnik, and I remember Sputnik well. I was all of 6 months old. Actually, my dad did take me outside when I was 6 months old and showed me Sputnik. He told me this later, and he says, that's why you're so interested in space. But it was the Sputnik era, and then I had a 5th grade teacher that really inspired me to get interested in science and science education. What is it that sparked all of your interest in science and in STEM, and how does that relate to what you're doing today? So we'll do reverse order this time, and let Steve go first.
Sure. Like I said, I feel for me that it was curiosity about how things work that always was the underlying driver for me to be in STEM. And I think that started when I was probably about 8 years old, and my grandmother gave me a Christmas gift that was a robot. And I played with it for a couple of hours, and it was expensive, an expensive toy. And then I got curious about how it worked, and I took it apart. And my mother was horrified and furious at me for doing that. But I was able to also then figure out how it worked and put it back together. And that was the funnest part of that thing. And that, to me, is the kind of thing I've always liked to do, is figure out how things work and kind of dig into them until I fully understand it. And so that was the thing that got me going. I think how that translates into my current life, as CEO of a company, I deal with something different every day, and sometimes it's financial things, and sometimes it's technical things, and sometimes it's people things. And I've developed that skill set of understanding how each of those different departments within Riverside work by being curious about how they work and getting involved in it and asking a lot of questions about how it works. So to me, the power of curiosity is the thing that was the spark, and it's something that really continues to help me to this day in terms of just asking why and asking questions and wanting to just know the answer for the sake of the answer. It's really, really powerful for me.
Great, thank you. Pete, why don't we go, what got you first interested in science and math and engineering?
I'll answer this in a few different ways. First, the personal angle. So I grew up farming, small farm, no technical background, nobody before me had gone to college. And I remember being in school one day and discovering people could actually do their jobs wearing white coats. Now, if you've worked on a farm, this is unnatural, right? So that was the beginning of it. Science fiction. So this is when Asimov was still writing books, Arthur C. Clarke was writing books, Heinlein was still writing new books. This was a big deal to come out from a little farming village and be able to see these things and think about space elevators. or what it means to be involved in flight between planets, or what it means to do long-distance communication. I don't think we had even a black and white television until I was well into my teens. So all these things were brand new. And you start to see, oh, I can do a lot. There's things that, beyond what I can do with my body, I can actually think and maybe do something a lot more interesting. Then I lucked into a math teacher who had my number, as they say. He discovered that if he offered a competition each week, a math puzzle outside of a normal class with a Mars bar as the prize. A farm kid, calories, good. I was in there winning that thing every week. And from there, it was competitive chess, and then just hooked. If you can do math, you can outthink a lot of things, a lot of people, a lot of situations. It doesn't solve everything, but it really helps. So that was, for me, that was really the beginning. Now, you mentioned Sputnik, so I want to talk about the beginning of DARPA, since that's where I am now, again, my second tour. DARPA was created because of Sputnik. 1957, 58, the Soviet Union put something up into orbit, and it was like the whole Defense Department woke up one day and said, oh, space might be important. And so DARPA was created, or ARPA at the beginning was created in 1958 to avoid technological surprise. So its birth was Sputnik. NASA was created the year after, and 3 years after that, DARPA gave NASA its first rocket engines. So I'm happy to talk and answer questions as we go through about what DARPA's been up to, and the autobiographical stuff, the Mars bar thing, keep it to yourselves. I'm sure your parents won't like it. But that's how these things actually start.
Great, thank you. Mark?
I would say that some of the similar things that happened to Steve and Peter are also true in my case. But it came a little bit more directly home. Where I lived overseas was right in the direct flight path of every airplane coming into the airport at the city that I lived at. So almost every 5 minutes we're having an aircraft coming over our house. And of course, when you're younger, you're mad about that. But as I grew older, I said, well, how are they able to do this? How are so many aircraft coming through? And this is in the late 60s, so it was the time where we're trying to figure out how things are working together. And secondly, right after that, in the early 70s, that's when all the space and moonshots and Apollo was going on. And I have my lining here with my space lining for that. You got to go with it. And so those two things brought together those ideas that, wow, there's so much more that we need to think about how to get things done and how we put things together, not just for application, not just for ability to go travel or to do something, but also to expand beyond where we are. So those kind of things were the two drivers that helped me to think about where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do.
Great, thank you. So we're going to be asking questions from the audience, and I'm going to focus on the students asking questions. So before we do that, one quick question for everybody up on the panel. What advice do you have for the parents? Because this is going to be their last chance to get anything in here, because we're going to let the kids ask all the questions. So, advice for parents.
I have 3 boys, 2 in high school and 1 in elementary school, and I'm trying to struggle with somehow their study habits as well. But I hearken back to my study habits, and I realized I wasn't such a good studious person as well. But the 2 things my parents did that were different, one was, I mentioned already, they let me drive toward my curiosity. Though they were not good in that, they did not know how to help me with math, they did not know how to help me in science. All those things in high school that I had to learn, they had no understanding of at all. But they were able to let me go in that area, not pushing me toward what they did. So help your children go after what they want to go after. Secondly, there was the driver that, okay, if you're going to go after what you need to go after, you have to show that you want it. So show me, to my parents, show me that you want to do this. And that became doing well in school, that this really means something to you. Put your skin in the game. And if those 2 things are there, they were going to let me keep going the way I wanted to go. And that's how it played out. And I would offer that advice to you, parents, as you work with your children. And I do that a little bit with my boys as well, somewhat successfully, not always.
Great. Mark. Pete, any advice for parents?
So I have, my own background, my parents were not technical. the farm people. So coming forward, so I also have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. They've all graduated college now, and they're all STEM. They're all working in STEM fields. One's PhD is computational genetics. He's on his 3rd startup. Another works in this area, as they say, on whatever. And the 3rd, my daughter works at Capital One as a machine learning engineer, which is really cool, applying advanced AI to problems that banks have, problems that have to work at line speed, at transaction speed, fraud, and so on. And she's about to go into a PhD program as well, because she's now seen the value that you get from the extra training and extra discipline from doing that level of graduate work. So looking back, I wish we could say we'd planned it all and that we knew they were going to be STEM and stay in STEM. But looking at others around us as we went through the high school experience in Texas and Virginia, it was to be there when it gets tough. Be there for your kids when it gets tough, because it will get tough at different times. The kids will try and do things that are too hard. You've got to be there to help them out, to back them up, to give them the encouragement, if not the actual technical help. The other thing, especially from the jobs I've done, looking back, and this is something we pushed on them a little bit, the STEM skill set, the STEM knowledge is absolutely required. But if you neglect the language, the music, the art side of it, you end up shallow, too shallow to really do the interesting things. So what we did with our kids all the way through high school was to encourage them to stay with an instrument, to stay in a sport, to maintain a language, always do math. But they were free to pick among the other sciences. And that really helped, I think. You end up, later on, at the time it's painful. No, you need to practice. Whether it's the sport or the instrument or the language, no, you need to practice. But it pays off down the road, not just in terms of getting into the college that you may want to get into, but looking back, it rounds you out in other areas. So when someone pitches something to you, or you're trying to frame an idea, you can not necessarily originate all that you need to, but you can appreciate other people's arguments for why something that isn't just a pure tech play actually makes more sense than the tech thing you may have wanted to do.
Great, thank you, Steve. And then I've got a question from a young lady over here.
You bet. I think that for parents, what I saw in my own experience is my parents were fairly hands-off, and I kind of found my own path with my children. I also have 3 children, 3 daughters. What I tried to do was provide just what Peter talked about, the kind of support for the most fully rounded education from elementary school all the way through as possible, but then also recognizing each one of them was an individual. I've seen some parents who they just insist that their children are on some path, and it might be a path that doesn't fit them, and that creates a lot of friction, a lot of anxiety, a lot of difficulties for the child and for the family. And I think the most important thing that I feel a parent can do is very much what we've already talked about up here so far, but also it's exposure. It's bringing them to an event like this where they can look around and say, wow, I didn't know that could be something I could go and do as part of a career or get more involved in. And then as a parent to make sure that they don't see the barriers to entry of STEM as real barriers to entry. If you're not a gifted mathematician, that doesn't matter. It might mean you have to work a little harder on the math side, but that's tractable. That's easy to do if you know that it's a doable thing. And so I think a lot of people are hesitant to get into STEM at a young age and throughout because they think it's harder than it really is. And if you're interested in it, that's the main ingredient. That's the main ingredient. And so as a parent, to just support that in whatever way it starts to expose itself in the child is to support that side of things.
Great, thank you. Here you go for your first question.
Why do you need to know math for science?
Why do you need to know math for science?
It's right up your alley, Peter.
So if you look into the sciences, all the sciences, the way knowledge is captured and expressed requires math. The way you get to reason within the sciences requires math. It's a way of thinking, a way of organizing thought and argument. So essential skills. So I've always viewed, coming from where I come from, as adding, I worked in, let's see, bugs and drugs at NIH and then BARDA, a biomedical research place, for about 6 years. You can learn, if you have smart people around you who are in that field, you can bring your skill set, and together as a team, you can get big things done. Working electronic warfare, the topic of my first tour at DARPA about 20 years ago. I stepped into that field coming from a math and acoustics and seismics background, and was able, in a good team, to learn what I needed to do, because the way you think, the way you argue, the way you run experiments, the way you analyze experimental results, the way you frame what you need to do next, that's math. It's logic, it's numerical math. That's all. I used to say it was the purest of sciences until I did logic and discovered one small change in the axioms and I could pick up a completely different architecture. But that's another story for another time.
Great, thank you. Anything, Mark or Steve, you want to add to that?
Just that it really is, I mean, Peter gave a great answer, and it's very complete. For me, it's just, for a long time, I didn't understand that it's just the language that is used to describe things in a very consistent way. And if you think about it that way, it makes more sense, some of the things that you're learning along the way. It's like learning a language. It's uncomfortable at first, but then it becomes second nature very quickly.
Great, thank you. Here's the next question.
What was your first invention?
What was your first invention?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I invented all kinds of things along the way. My parents, they did help me out by getting me things like erector sets, which is the old people's version of Legos. And I built all kinds of things. I was so fascinated by all the different possibilities of taking a box of parts and being able to build something. That's the part that mattered the most to me, is having that ability to use creativity in a ability to put something together. So I can't point at anything that you would see and say I invented that, but I invented a lot of stuff along the way that meant a lot to me.
Peter, Mark? Invention may not be the right word, but my older brother was involved in building sort of the cars that you race for down roads, like scouts do. And so I was helping him to build those things, and then I said I wanted to build my own that I could race, because I wanted to actually do something with what I was making. So that was kind of the first set of things that I was working on.
Okay, this thing sounds strange. Spirographs. I used to sit there. If you ever had one of these things, you pin the little cogs on the page, and you create math pictures in 2D. That was high tech for me when I was a kid. I remember spending way too many hours trying to come up with really, really acute curves, interesting curves, and then figuring out how to describe them back to the language of math. That was a big deal. And from there, I guess the natural step was I had access to a lot of bike parts. And people like to throw bikes away onto farms. Guess who picked them up? So the bikes with the big wheels, small wheels, strange gear sets, everything I could. My hands were permanently greasy from doing things like that. So that was this experimentation with just stuff you got around. It doesn't need to be a fancy kit or anything else. You get curious about it, and then you figure out how to describe it, and does it work, and when does it break, and is it actually okay to call your parents from 20 miles away because the thing you built that took you that far broke down and you can't get back? Well, you won't be back for a few more hours than you thought. These things just happen.
Yeah, so I'll add one on that one because it's something that will tie a couple of things together. So when I was a second lieutenant in the Air Force, I was working in a laboratory, and I worked with a couple of key people, and I actually have an invention that's in most of your pockets. How many people here have a cell phone? Okay, how many people here use GPS on the cell phone? Well, there's an algorithm in there that manages the clock that's on your that's in your phone, because the clocks that are in the phone are not very good. GPS requires a really good clock. So I developed an algorithm that would take a very poor clock and allow it to sync up to GPS. And so I'm a co-inventor of that, and I'm proud to say that it's in everybody's phone, and I'm really sad to say that because I was an Air Force lieutenant, I don't get any royalties off of that. Because if I got a penny for every place that algorithm showed up, I would be a billionaire. But that's the power of being able to get engaged in in science and math and being at the right place at the right time and being interested in it. And you get to say that something you invented ended up in everybody's pocket. So it can happen to anybody. Next question.
So first of all, what system of measurement do you think is easier for engineers who use metric or imperial? And do you think that the U.S. Should switch to the metric system to avoid some sort of airspace crash that wasted like $1 million?
So, did not expect a political question from one of the students in the room. Good job. Okay. Metric versus imperial units, and should the U.S. go metric? Well, who wants to take the for? Who wants to take the against? We'll give you 2 minutes. Debate club.
I think Peter probably has a distinct perspective on this as well, but that's been something that has been attempted and tried and worked on for a long time. But in the scientific community, it largely is the way that the metric system has prevailed. And that's the lingua franca for the world at large, is the metric system. So scientists and mathematicians and engineers have used that system for a long time as a common system. In that world where people haven't done that, it has created mistakes that have cost spacecraft to fail, and there's numerous examples where one group of scientists was working using the metric system and the other not, and then when they went to integrate both of their things together, it didn't work very well. So it's been a long time since that's been problematic, I think, but so in the scientific community, I think we're leading the way on that.
So this is an example for me where that more rounded training, more rounded background comes into play. So I'm an R&D guy. That's all I've ever been. And people say, well, you do innovation, don't you? And I say, well, kinda. My job is to, and it's always been, can it be done? How well can it be done? And then the really hard part begins, which is, if it's a really important new technology, it's disruptive to how people do business, how they live their daily lives. And this change management aspect of technology is actually the big deal. So like the example I like to give is my first car was, we were living in Pittsburgh as grad students, my wife and I at Carnegie Mellon, and we had a 1973 Ford Maverick. And because it was Pittsburgh with a lot of salt on the ground, we didn't have floor plates actually underneath the passenger or the driver's side. It was plywood. Not by design, they just rotted out, okay? So that was 40-some years ago. And I'd say, well, look, so there's that awesome car that we had, the first car, and come forward to today, and I drive a super high-tech system with a car with 40-some computers in it. So the change management aspect of this, I think from a science perspective, moving to metric, we're there. I mean, we still have some archaic measurements in place, foot-pounds and pounds of thrust and other things for some of the hypersonics and space vehicles that we deal with. But they're in there because some people like to get that, because they haven't changed to a purely metric approach. So this is a change management issue for me, the way I see it from the things I've done and been and where I am now. And change management's hard.
Yeah. Thank you. We got another question from, Mark.
One quick note. All right, thank you. One quick note is, you have to learn both if you're going to be in the science and STEM world. You're going to have to know the other one, so just get with it and know that. It sometimes is difficult to play with two, got it. I wish it was different, but if you want to talk to your buddy who doesn't know STEM, he knows how tall he is in feet, in inches. You have other things you have to deal with. Similarly, when you deal with any scientific thing at all, you have to connect units. Whether you're metric or not metric, you have to make sure your units match as you do any calculation anywhere. It's one of the classic problems that engineering students go through when they start to learn, is forgetting their units, and then they get all messed up along the way, and they cross units, not just metric and imperial, but just any types of units as you're working your calculation. So being clear about under what you're doing also applies to particularly what measurement you're using. And so it's just part and parcel how you think and how you operate.
Great, thank you. Next question.
How do you think AI will change the future?
How do you think AI will change the future?
Okay.
My computer's working on that right now.
All right. So back around 1960, one of the first DARPA office directors was looking at a room full of computers. So this size room, these are big, noisy things. A teletype was the output from these systems. And they were doing missile trajectories and other things. And his insight was, we have to take this type of system from not just being the tool in this special room, it has to become a partner, a wingman, that lab assistant, the research partner who anticipates what you need, who is there with you, who understands context. So that was the JCR Licklider in 1960. Saying that computers as tools to computers as partners. And DARPA has been investing in AI research ever since. Most recently, last September in 2018, we announced a $2 billion investment in AI technologies. And I can explain where we're going with that. But it wasn't, I'd say that after 60 years of investment, it's a success overnight. Because that's the way it feels, right? We live in the moment these days. But the first big push in AI has changed the world that we live in already. And this produced rule-based systems. If your parents, the parents here, if you use TurboTax or one of these packages, that's first wave AI, rule-based systems. If you have a router, someone on a network near you, rule-based systems. These things are integral. They've changed how we live today. Mid-1970s, the basis of neural nets, deep learning, were being put into place. So the theory is being built well before we had access to a lot of inexpensive compute cycles with these things, these GPUs. That there are some young parents here, so I'm assuming it's your fault because of those first-person shooter games you were playing when you were teenagers that created the market for the graphical processing units that gave us cycles, a lot of compute cycles that happened to be useful also for doing neural net calculations. Then the internet gave us access to a lot of labeled data. So 2010 through now, again, I know from where you sit, a lot of people here, it seems like that is the big wave of AI, machine learning. From where we sit, it's the beginning of a crest, or moving towards a crest of second wave AI, which is machine-trained systems. They're still not going to get us to that vision that DARPA's been pushing for 60 years, which is computer as partner. So the two waves behind us basically describe rule-based, recognize machine learning systems, and we don't know where this is going to end up. There's a lot of work to do on stability there yet. Robustness, both in the sense of it works in this room. Does it work outside? Probably not. Can we guarantee performance levels? Nope. Okay. So we have a lot of groundwork still to do there. In addition to, I work in the defense world, adversarial attacks on machine learning systems. So these things, there's a lot of robustness work to be done on second wave systems, as well as just raw performance. And the third wave, the one I think really will start to change things, is the ability for the computers, because that's what they are, just running AI technologies, to be able to anticipate and to provide information and help and advice, just as a smart partner would do, or partners would do alongside you. And that matters whether you're someone flying a tactical jet with a wingman who really is who is a system now and not a person, or you're sitting at home perhaps with elderly, or you're looking after someone who's sick, and there are systems there able to accurately monitor and preempt situations and give you information that's relevant in the moment and not just some random piece of thing that the system happened to throw at you. So there's a lot to come yet. This is, again, a 60-year journey so far, and we have a long way to go, and it won't be until, I think, 20 years out we realize where we are today and just how immature the technologies are at the moment, even though we're all caught up in the excitement. And there's a huge potential, don't get me wrong, in terms of what can be done.
One quick thing to add to that, and it was a great answer, Peter, but you know, in your background, you played competitive chess as a you know, in your youth, and somebody of that, you know, somebody then could aspire to be the best chess player on the planet, right? With the proper training, with the you know, the right focus on that, and we have passed the point where a human being will ever be the best on this planet at chess. And we passed that not long ago, and then very quickly we passed another milestone where there's unlikely to ever be a person who can play the game Go that is going to be better than any computer. And if you're a, you know, somebody who's 15 years old and you're looking at the world, artificial intelligence will have an impact in your life. It'll have a dramatic impact in your life in ways I couldn't possibly tell you, other than I'm certain that it will. I'm certain that we're approaching a point where there's a consolidation of technologies. Google spends a ton of money on this, Facebook does, Snapchat does, Uber does. All these companies that are spending tremendous amounts of money on research. Riverside Research is. Well, we have an artificial intelligence demo in the multi-purpose room that you can go and look at. This will change your life. Whether or not you're in STEM, it's a topic you should stay curious about. It's a topic that all of us should stay aware of because it has ethical implications, it has technology implications, and if you're younger than me, and probably even for me, it will change your life in some dramatic ways.
Great, thank you, Mark. Anything else you want to add? With that, we're coming up to the end of our time. I'd like to give each one of the panelists just 2 minutes for any closing comments or thoughts. And so, who would like to go first?
Sure, I'm happy to. I just want to thank everybody for coming out to this, the Nysmith School, all of the sponsors, Peter for coming out here representing a phenomenal organization in DARPA that has a tremendous history to it. I'm very happy to be here today, and again, thank you for coming.
Thank you also for showing up and helping your children move forward in this area. This is a large area. It's not a small, tiny niche area that's moving forward. STEM, like Steve said earlier, is going to affect everything we do in life. No matter what you do, these things are going to be part and parcel, and how you understand them will also make whatever field you go into, you'll be better in that field because you also understand what the underlying frame and underlying baselines that support you doing your field. So you're going to need to know a lot of this stuff anyways, even if you don't go and major or focus on STEM in the future. You need to be STEM savvy because this is where the world is going. Similarly, the spectrum of STEM is wide and large. There's ones that are research-oriented, there's ones that are application-oriented, engineering-oriented, there's one that's more digital transformation-oriented. There's a whole slew of different things that you go into. So don't just focus on one avenue. Recognize what is out there and what could be part of your future. It's exciting, and the companies that, like Perspecta, are helping to move that forward in concert with our clients and our government to make that as part of our future as well for the country.
So I work at DARPA, and our job is to help the nation avoid technological surprise and to impose surprise. So we're relying on you now as you go through school, as you go into the workforce. We need your ideas. DARPA is a funding agency. All of our people, myself included, we're all temporary. We come in from jobs, industry jobs, from universities. We do tours of 3 to 4 years, and then we leave. And this is how the organization stays on the leading edge of everything and driving everything. So those ideas, they're your ideas. When we go out and we fund universities and companies to do the work, that's where you and your children are going to be. When you come to us with new ideas that we hadn't thought of and no one's thought of, but we need to know if it can work, that's you. So from a national security perspective, STEM, absolutely critical, absolutely critical. So please stay in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to please join me in a round of applause.